So, hello, can we start? Nice. Okay, if you can't hear me, please do some kind of gesture to let me know that I should speak up. I would like to welcome you here at Mews. My name is Hanouskova. I would be presenting you throughout the night. And I'll give you a short intro, and then I'll pass the word to our speakers. We have three tonight, Erin, Ria, and Vlatka. So yeah, that's the basics. I would like to give you some context about why I tried to bring you here, because when I joined Mews, it was almost 2 years ago, and before that I worked almost 2 years as a solo writer at Social Bakers. Now you may know them as Amplify. And I didn't realize how much I struggled because I was the only person doing that job. And when I joined Mews 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, it was three of us. And suddenly everything felt easier. And even though it wasn't simple, it was easier. And I realized how important it is to have the people who do the same thing as you do, or more or less the same. And then Erin joined us last autumn, and then Tyler joined us also last autumn. We have a newcomer. And I figured out how important it is to be surrounded by people who do the same, who understand the issues you're doing. I may be doing something wrong. No, I'm not. Good. And yeah, so I realized how nice it is. So that was the context that brought me to try to bring you all here, to try to build a local community. Because even though we have a team at Mews right now, we are all around Europe, with Mishko being in Ukraine, Fatiha being in Paris, Tyler being in Madrid, and me being here, and Erin coming from Berlin whenever she can. And yeah, so this is why we're here, hopefully, and maybe we can talk about the opportunities or possibilities of bringing each other closer to each other, more often. And my question actually is, because when I was writing or thinking of this talk, I was thinking of content designers and UX writers, but I wonder how many of you have a title that, or maybe not a title, it doesn't really matter, who of you is a content designer or would consider themselves a content designer? Can you raise your hand? Who of you is a designer? Not content, more like a designer? Is there any marketer? And the rest of you? Technical writers? And some content managers? Okay, thank you. So this was my survey, let's say. And one last thing, one thank you actually, is related to community, and it goes to the community team, who unfortunately is not here anymore. But when Isabel is watching the recording, I want to give her a huge thank you, because she helped to put this event together from Dublin. So thanks, thanks Isabel. And yeah, now it's time to pass the word to Erin, who would, who would tell you a little bit more about how she put together, how she was shaping user journeys with a unified voice and tone before she joined Mews. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbora. Yeah, and I just want to add my welcome as well. Thank you all for joining us. We're hoping that it might become something that we can do a little bit more regularly. And yeah, maybe, today we have a content design focus, but it's great to see that we've got a few different disciplines in the room as well. Let me check that this works. All right. So our team at Mews, Barbora mentioned we have 4 people, we're all working remotely. I've come from Berlin today. And we're actually, at the moment, looking for another team member as well. So if you or you have people who are looking for content design roles, I'd like to just plug that at the beginning before we get started as well. All right. So I'm currently the content design manager at Mews. And although I've been working in UX for over a decade, I'm quite new to Mews. So this evening, I'm not going to talk about a Mews project because I feel like we've only just started to do great things together. But I hope that at a future event that the team will be able to tell you more about some of the great things that we're doing at Mews. And this evening, when we were thinking about what would be a good starter topic for our first event, we thought, let's start with the first thing that every content designer is tasked with or asked about in job interviews, which is voice and tone. So that's our topic for my talk this evening. And so I'm taking you back to probably the biggest voice and tone project that I worked on, but certainly the most challenging. So before we dive in, I'm curious, we had a few content designers and content people who wrote the voice and tone guide at their company. All right. And then for the others, who's read the voice and tone guide at your company? All right. So the joke goes, if you've read your company's voice and tone guide, you probably wrote it. And that's often the case. So just a quick look to make sure we're all on the same page. What is it? The voice is how you sound all the time. Whenever you speak, you sound like you. That's the voice of your brand. So it should always sound like one consistent person who's talking. And instead, the tones are the different words that you can use for your brand to change the mood, to communicate urgency in an error message versus a success message in a marketing channel versus in the UI. And it makes sure that you always sound the same, that it sounds like the same person talking to you, even if they change from a tone of surprise to a tone of welcome and so on. And then you usually have some examples of how to write like this, not like that. You have your style guide, which is all your grammar, when to capitalize the brand names, all of those things to make sure you're consistent every time you write them. And they can often be owned by brand and marketing, but more and more we're seeing a shift to who else in the company is writing for your product. And it's not just the brand and marketing team. So this is why this evening I'm talking about how you get that voice and tone across the whole company. So if we take, for example, the Mews tone of voice as a voice, we're a welcoming expert about hospitality, and some of our tone words, for example, are authority, empathy, humans. We speak to inspire, we speak with wit. Those are a lot of our marketing voices. We've got our before examples and then our after examples of how we would write this at Mews. And in the content team, we also have some other words that guide us how to write success messages, how to write error messages. We have the things that help us write for the UI rather than the brand. And actually, it's a little bit different on the content team as well, because often we need to be a white label brand, which means there's parts of our product that the hotel might want to put their branding behind. So we need to have something that's flexible enough, that's global enough to work in those moments as well as when we're speaking with the pure Mews voice. And why is it important? Because when it's out of character, it can distract from the experience. And we want people to focus on what we're telling them, what we're guiding them to, and not how we sound. If they're focusing too much on how we sound, it could be the signal that maybe something is a little bit out of character. And when you're trying to bring your leaders on board to tell them about why they need a voice and tone guide, often we go to the content perspective. So, we talk about it's a great way to get everybody writing in the same voice. But it's important to give the business perspective as well, which could be something like, this is how we convey our positioning in the market. This is how we really make our point of difference compared to other brands. And again, the content's view might be, we want to reach greater consistency in the user journey, But the business perspective would be that we want to improve the quality of leads. So the voice that people are hearing in the marketing funnel is the same voice that they're getting when they open the product. And the reason why I'm giving you these kinds of arguments is because these are the arguments I needed to make at Babbel when I was working there. Babbel is a language learning app, which some of you might be familiar with. It's based in Berlin, and it was one of my big voice and tone projects. So when I first started working for Babbel, that was our voice and tone guide. There were a few examples, but basically this was it. And we've got 4 words. You can see at the top, if you can read the bit on the yellow band, that the voice words are exactly the same as the tone words. Expressive, light-hearted, practical, and geeky. And this worked really well for Babbel when it was a small company, but by the time I worked there, there were about 500 people, and we were starting to outgrow this voice and tone guide. Particularly a word like geeky, we found that people had really different interpretations of what that meant, and people who didn't come from a native English-speaking background had really different ideas as well. And, you know, we were starting to get some really different voices coming through. You know, it's also light-hearted. Is it a light-hearted grandmother, or is it a light-hearted banker? There's lots of different ways that you can be light-hearted. I mean, you can be a geeky Star Wars fan, or you could be a geeky grammar nerd. So these were quite open to interpretation. And what we had was hundreds of different voices, basically. And we had all these different channels, our brand and marketing, our email, our blog, a different blog, 2 blogs. We had social media, we had podcasts, we had lessons, the actual language lessons themselves, where you learnt the language, and we had the UI, all trying to use these same 4 words, and it was a bit of a mess. We ended up with about 100 different voices for the hundreds of writers that we had across the company. And then we had all the different channels, and we had advice like this, that you could write in different tones in different channels, and instead what we're getting were different voices in different channels. And we had one more problem as well. You might know this guy. A lot of people felt that we should be competing with Duolingo, which is a brand with a really strong brand voice, really funny, really edgy, and they were trying to bring that into the Babbel voice as well, and just making even more of a mess. So we ended up with content like this could be geeky, could be a bit of a dad joke. We had content that could be lighthearted or could be making fun of our learners. And we had content that could be expressive or could be just a little bit too far over the line. And this is just in our social media. Then when you got into the product, it was quite a different voice again. This one, the last one, just to put it in context, was mistakes that you could make in the language if you weren't being careful in German. So it's supposed to be, I got my permit to drive. But we had a lot of these articles about how to swear, mistakes not to make. And then when you got into the product, this wasn't there at all. So it was a really inconsistent voice all the way through. So the UX writer and I, we were 2 of us at the time, we decided that we needed a new voice and tone guide. We were going to fix this. And we did all the things that you're supposed to do. We did a competitor benchmark with our major competitors. We did an audit across the user journey of all the different ways that our voice changed at different moments in the customer journey. And we put together a beautiful guide. We had a new persona, who was your favorite teacher. We had a new set of voice words and tone words. We had examples from the product and all different examples of the ways that we would use this, how to write in all of these voices. And we rolled it out at an all hands. We presented it. Everybody loved it. And then absolutely nothing changed. Everybody kept writing the way they were writing before. This went into a drawer and nobody looked at it again. And we thought, where did we go wrong? And we realized that what we failed to do was we failed to take our stakeholders with us from the beginning. We'd gone off into our corner and we'd written it, and then we thought it was so good that everyone would start using it. And that's not what happened at all. So it stayed that way for a little while. And then in 2020, unsurprisingly, we had a whole lot of new users come into the product. Suddenly learning from an app, learning at home was really popular. And so our marketing team put together a new brand positioning statement around meaningful conversations, things that inspired us, things that brought us together. And it was beautiful. They created a new campaign. The tagline was "Understanding changes everything." So you can imagine in social media, people were getting the articles about how to swear in Spanish, and then they were getting into our other marketing channels and getting this beautiful, moving stuff about connecting. And I said to them, we're writing in all of these different voices, and they asked me to fix it. So our first important lesson, the thing we missed the first time round, is we didn't have a sponsor for our project. And now we had one. And the second thing that we had now was allies on other teams. Now I had been there a little bit longer. I had contacts in the brand team and the localization team. So I pulled them together and we created a cross-functional task force. And we had all noticed the same kinds of problems. We decided to work together on the new voice and tone guide. Our third thing that we did differently was to involve the stakeholders right from the beginning. So we held a workshop just with the learning content team, the people who were writing the lessons, because that was where we saw the most unique voices coming through. And we sat down and we asked them what they needed to sound like in the lessons. What were the tones of voice that they needed to be able to flex when they were teaching really boring grammar points? And then we got our decision makers across the company together and we held workshops where we showed them over 70 different examples of different content that we gathered from the UI, from the marketing channels, from all of the different channels that we could find, from great to awful. And we got them to say whether it represented Babbel for them and whether it represented our new brand positioning or not. And that was the anchor that we gave them as, think back to that beautiful, meaningful conversations. Is this a match? Is this not a match? And we always paired a product person or an engineer together with a marketing person, for example, to try and avoid any little bubbles of agreement that happened, to make sure we had a little bit of push and a bit of give and take between the different opinions. And so this meant that we could collect data. So we got them to go through all of these examples, thinking about whether it was relatable for our users, whether it was approachable for people who weren't native speakers, whether it was understanding for everybody, across our learning ranges, and to say yes, no, or meh. And then we plotted it out. We gave it a quantitative score. We were able to, put a number on those, and then we were able to give the attributes that people had used to describe it as well. So all of this qualitative data about the different words that they'd used, whether they thought it was trying too hard to be quirky, whether they thought the humour was kicking down, and we were able to create a list of words that we wanted to be and that we didn't want to be. And that's what went into our new voice and tone words. So the most common yes words became our new attributes, but we made sure that we also included all of the things that we weren't, because that was where we'd seen trouble happening before. We knew that when we weren't being precise and we were leaving too much room for interpretation, that was where we started to run into trouble. And we created a new persona. So in this case, our persona was a guide who loves the language and wants to share it with you and wants you to fall in love with it as well. And that was the persona we wanted people to keep in mind as they were writing. And then we really got into the details. Then we made it as detailed as we could. And for every attribute, we broke it down a little bit more. What does friendly mean? It means being warm and enthusiastic, but it doesn't mean being too intimate or too slangy. And we gave examples of all the different ways. And a lot of these were really from the product as well. They were the ways that people were getting that tone confused before. And then the thing that we hadn't done before that we did now, our 5th lesson, was to make space for pushback. Because you need to bring your stakeholders in at the beginning, but then you also need that round of feedback where they get to say which bits they like and which bits they didn't. And actually, particularly our marketing and social media team, they were a bit worried about the word lighthearted. Before, they'd been aiming for funny, and now we were telling them to dial that down and to be more motivational and be more inspirational. So we introduced this idea of a dial to show them that in some channels you could dial up that lightheartedness. Maybe in the UI we would dial that down. It's hard to be funny when you're trying to guide people. And the same with inspiration. Our marketing and our brand spots could be more inspirational, but too much inspiration inside the product started to come off as insincere. So that's where we might dial it a little bit down. And this was a great way to just get our consensus with everybody across the different teams. We did put in an extra page about humour, though, because we really wanted to get rid of those dad jokes and those articles about swearing. So we made sure that, we really made it clear that if you're going to be funny, it should be witty and not vulgar and not goofy. So our lesson 6 was about what do you do once you've rolled it out? Because that's when either people start using it or they start ignoring it. And now, because we had engaged people at leadership level, because we'd brought stakeholders in at the beginning, because we'd checked in at that pushback moment, we had people who were champions of our voice and tone. And so it wasn't just us on our own saying, please don't write like that. We had people from leadership down saying, that's not the new point of difference. That's not the new brand positioning. That's not going to work. But actually, I think one of my favourite moments was hearing one of the lesson content creators who previously had written very funny lessons, stopping someone else and saying, that's not the new voice and tone, actually, and showing her how to do it better because he had the examples in front of him. So that was a great, great moment to get, our hardest nuts starting to refer to the voice and tone guide as well. So off the back of this, because it was so successful, we were actually able to get more sponsorship and more funding to roll out a couple of other guides as well. We actually got some funding to bring somebody in to write a diversity and inclusion guide for our content creators, and to create a glossary of diversity and inclusion words that would be good to know. And this won an award in 2022, so that's something that we're very proud of. And that's actually open. Anybody can go and look for the Babbel Good Terms to Know for Diversity and Inclusion if you ever struggle with definitions and so on in your company. And so these are basically the 6 lessons, but I would encourage you, if you're doing something similar, to start at number 1, find that sponsor if you need to do a similar piece of work, and get started. And if you would like to connect and ask for any questions about this, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer more questions about it as well. And for now, I'll hand back to Barbora.
Yeah, and before you can clap. We have time for about 3 questions now, so if you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand. I would come to you with the microphone and you can ask directly here. Anyone? Anything?
Yeah, so the work with your voice and tone guide is kind of similar to how sometimes designers work with design style guides and so on. So I understand that all those steps helped to have better engagement while you were creating the tone of voice and maybe some good steps, but how did you track how well the guide was followed afterwards? And what kind of success did you have, or could you compare before this new approach and after?
It's a good question. one of the people who helped us create it was from the localization team, and they were our best police, let's say, because every bit of content in the whole company would cross their desk, from the marketing teams right through to the UI, and they were the ones who were most able to flag when something didn't sound quite right. So that was really helpful to have that kind of cross-cutting view of all the content that's been created at all times in the company. So I would say that was sort of our secret power there. But it is a challenge with design systems as well. And that's where I think people who are cross-team can bring a lot of value, when they're not just working on one area, but they're seeing across a lot of different teams.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Okay, there's one in the back.
Yeah. Given that I work closely with stakeholders, I'm wondering that given this is more of a qualitative update, how do you kind of prove that it's making an impact in the end? Like that change in voice actually made a brand more trustworthy, for example. So how do you prove it like it worked?
Yeah, it's always very hard to put a number on content, I find. And we didn't track this through necessarily to sales, but one of the ways we have of tracking whether people are happy in Babbel is with their subscription. And so we did actually notice a drop-off in the number of people unsubscribing. Of course, our new brand positioning had a lot to do with that as well, you know, like the great new marketing and so on. But hopefully it was also a little bit more that consistency that people were feeling in the content as well.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Or not? Okay, if there's not any more questions, I would thank Erin, and I would pass the word to Ria. I think she's a designer at STRV, designing Zoe app. Yeah. And she would give you a talk on humanizing product features. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm not used to not having a microphone, so I have this in my. Okay, so I'll just put this in a bigger space here. Okay, so yeah, like Bara mentioned, I'm Ria, so I work for STRV. I'm a senior product designer there. So similar to Erin, I will be somehow sharing with you a case study from the app that I'm working on right now from Zoe. I'll talk more about it later. So just to give a clarification, because I'm talking about two companies here. I work for STRV. It's an agency. It's a design and engineering company. And currently, it's almost 2 years now. I've been working closely with Cosmic Latte. You might not be familiar with the company, but you might heard some of its products. Currently, we have two LGBTQ plus apps. One is Surge, which is for gay men, and second one is Zoe. As you can see from the visuals, it's a mobile application for lesbian, bisexual, and queer women. So that's what I'm working on for the last 2 years, both of the apps. So I'm switching between these. But for today, I will be talking more onto Zoe. I'll be talking about one in particular, how we transform one existing feature into a more humanized feature to solve one of the biggest issues of the app. I maybe not solve, but help solve it, because we have a lot of ways to solve an issue. So like every other app, of course, we're not perfect. We have a problem. And like every other dating apps, one of the biggest issues are scammers, fake profiles. I know some of you probably, or most of us, use dating apps. And we are not always sure if the people we're talking on the other end is real, right? So it's also an issue for us in Zoe. But it's kind of pity, because when you check the reviews in the app, right now I'm proud to say we have one of the highest rated lesbian dating app in the market. So I'm proud to say that. But it's a pity because people always comment, oh, it's a nice interface, it's user-friendly. But then it's kind of doesn't matter too much if people don't feel safe, right? So we are trying to make a community here, especially with LGBTQ plus community. It's kind of sensitive to have a community where they could express themselves. So it's not like we're not doing anything about it. We have reporting mechanisms. They can report somebody who they think is a fake or is a scammer. We also have AI verification. Now that AI is coming into the market, more common now, we have the developers working on how we can detect fake profiles based on their photos, for example, or duplicate profiles. I'm not familiar how it works, but the last one, and we think this is still the most effective so far. I think you might be familiar with them. I think most dating apps have them where you verify yourself. The most common way to do it is they ask you to do a gesture, like any gesture there, and you copy it. So the admin from our side can verify that it's really you who is on the profile photo. So that's what we have right now. And we think that it is effective. Like verified users equals safety. Like if someone is verified and I'm talking to them, I feel like I'm safer because, okay, they verified him or her. But it's not, or them, sorry. But it's not that easy. We have limitations here. We are not only working with like local market. We're mostly working. We're mostly serving people from the U.S. market. That's why we have limitations when terms to privacy. We cannot just force them to do verification, verify yourself, and you cannot use the app. In some regions, though, we managed to do this, so I don't even have to talk to this because we solved it. But most of our market is in the US. So how might we make our user feel safer in our app? And I think the key word here is feel, because if I ask a different question like how can we make the app safer, there are different ways how we can do it. I probably a different discussion for it. Developers probably would talk more better about it. Like they could implement better AI verification. But for today, I would be focusing more on feel because we are in a content design talk. So we are working more on emotions. So let's go to the solution. But actually, before I talk about the solution, let's step back a little bit and how we kind of deep down and define the problem. So what? We know already that the problem is people find it not so safe to deal with scammers or fake profiles, where they usually have problems when they find out that when the person they're talking to is not real after they do background checks on them or something. And when is actually, back to that. When is actually crucial? Like when do they find out that they're fake? Some of them find out just by looking at the swiping screen. They already know it's fake. But what we found out that most of them realize and most of them feel that this is the most important time when they need to know if someone is real is when they're talking to them already. That's when during chatting, like when you're chatting with someone, am I going to give them the information about myself? Is it safe? So that's a crucial time when we thought that this situation, like during chatting, is the important time when they need to know that someone is real or not. And how did they react to it? Did they do something about it? And apparently they did. We found out that they're doing their own verification. On their side, some people even do image search. Like they take the photo of the people they matched with and then search it back to Google image search or something. So just to make sure that they are real or not. So they're doing something already. So we thought, why can't we leverage this human verification? Like they do it already. Why not we just empower them to do it better, right? So remember this that I showed earlier. We know it's effective if people actually verify themselves, but it's one-sided. I verify myself because I want to prove to everyone that I am verified, but not the scammers, of course. Why would they verify themselves? So what if we hand over the magic wand to them and ask them to verify the other person? So from this, we thought again the when I told you earlier, like during while you're chatting with that person already and you saw that the person is not verified, we prompt you to ask them, are you feeling safe? Why don't you ask them to verify themselves first before I continue talking with you? So it's something that we thought people would feel safer if they did the verification themselves. So how it works is you click on it, you ask for a mutual verification. If the person agrees, then you both would see each other. One is like doing other gesture, the other one is doing another gesture. So it's a win-win on both sides if they match. So yeah, like I mentioned, like it might sound like we are getting lazy, like, okay, do the job for us, but actually it's not. People trust other people than a machine or a CAPTCHA or a faceless machine, I would say. People trust more if it's actually me chatting with a person and it just feels like somebody on the other end is another person, a real person. If they decline, then I guess they're not real. So were we successful when we released this? It's a yes and a no. Yes, we have, like, of course, there will be a lot of people who used it last year. There were like 20,000 verifications. Because of the declines, people would send the verification and around 4,000 declined. And from there, we uncovered like 3.6 profiles are fakes. So it's kind of like a community team building, teamwork thing. Like they helped us uncover fake profiles by asking them to verify, and then they declined. So we also got a little bit of like good words from them. It's kind of hard to get good words from some features, honestly. So a good thing we found them. And a no, because at the same time, this is just one layer. Again, I was more focusing on the emotion and the feeling part. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be actually their problem. I still feel liable for them doing it still by the end of the day. Like, why would they need to verify each other if we as a company manage to remove all the scammers, right? They don't even have to worry about it. So we're still getting started though. We're still aiming a time when they don't have to verify each other anymore. Like everyone is real, no one is scammer. But of course, I'm talking about an ideal world. So yeah. And if I can summarize like what we learned from this is first design for conversations. So if you notice that feature that already exists, we didn't do something new. We just transformed it, put it in the right place, right? We put it in the conversation. It's not like, yeah, this one would explain it better. We didn't try to, how do you call it, put another CAPTCHA, put another required feature for them to do. But we just took away what we have right now, which I think is working, and then just put it in their conversation. And then second is make it relatable. So it's the same as like having conversation. If something that feels like part of the flow, it wouldn't feel like something that you need to do as an extra. It just flows with it. It's not like you need to, oh God, another step. It doesn't feel that way. It feels more like something that, I see, it makes sense. It's like invisible. So yeah. And the last one is empower users. So I think I kept repeating this word already, like give the users the wand. If you give them the power to have control in their own space or in their own app, where they should feel safe, then they would feel empowered. They would feel like they are not being crushed in this app and being put down, but rather they have the freedom and control to maneuver whatever they want, share whatever they want, remove whatever they want, report whatever they want. So yeah. So in the end, humanized design is conversational, relatable, and empowering. So that's just one example of how we transformed a feature into something more human and something more touchable. So anyone can just use it, but not at the same time feel like forced to do it. And that's all. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Ria. Does anyone have a question? No?
Yes, Erin.
No, I was curious whether you thought about how that moment is actually almost a little moment of delight as well. It's this moment where you get to have an interaction with a photo with somebody and you're both doing the same action. So I almost see like an opportunity to go past this mechanical verification to something a little bit flirty or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that why you've got the heart gesture, or are there other gestures and so on that you can do there?
We didn't think of that. We should probably hire a content designer. But yeah, but that's really interesting. Like we thought of it more like a protection thing for them, but now that you mention it, that it might actually be fun. Like instead of just having these gestures where you do it separately, but something that connects, like the heart would be connected in the end. That's actually cool. Okay, I will add that in the list. Thank you for the free consultation. Yeah. I just wanted to add because when Baro was asking, like, are you content designer or are you designer? I wasn't sure if I will raise my hand on both because I'm wearing all the hats basically right now. But that's why I'm very interested with this event because I also see the potential of content design in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how did you measure or observe your progress in the sense that you probably had some kind of feeling safe or safety metric, and then how it changed after introducing this procedure. That's one, and half question is when two people are verified in a dialogue, does the profile also get
Verified.
universally verified or not? But the first one is more interesting. Like, how did you see increase in some kind of metric or a couple of metrics that are responsible for like trustworthiness or safety or something like that? And what was the difference before
Yeah.
and after?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, that's why I also asked it from Erin because for us, honestly, it's hard to measure an emotion or a feeling because it's very qualitative. That's why when I showed you the numbers, we are just hoping that since we eradicated those fake profiles, it somehow contributed to the feeling of safety. So that's the only way we can put it down in numbers or something measurable. And some good comments from people. That means that they actually discover the feature and use it. But I'm sorry, I cannot answer like how happy or safe they are after this. The second one, sorry, what was the second?
Second one was just a more a mechanical one from designer point of view. If two people are
Yeah.
verified in a dialogue, do their profiles become verified for everyone else?
No,
And
no,
do
no.
people can okay, so
No,
makes sense.
definitely. Yeah. Right now, we're trying to still keep our own verification, given that we have our own standards and guidelines. But yeah, we don't. Maybe in the future, if we can, if someone asks for verification, we can do the same. But it doesn't work that way right now.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll ask you to switch the microphones and. And we'll welcome on the stage Vladka, who's founder of an agency, pretty much Nomads. And she would give us a 10-minute deep dive into the fast-paced world of agency work, I guess.
Okay, hello. It's very hard to now exchange the stage after those two amazing talks talking about real case studies. My talk, I wouldn't say it's it's a rant. It kind of is, but don't worry, it will end on a higher note. As you've seen above the show of hands, we are from the marketing agency, so our view of the content design may be a bit different than what you are used to. And I will talk about the ideal versus the reality we actually face in our work. And yeah, it is how the agencies work. So a bit of a background, as Bara already said, I'm the owner and founder of the Pretty Much Nomads agency. We create content in English and in Czech language for tech companies. We have really good view into the UX as well, as we have UX writers in our team, and it's pretty common that we do basically all the software-related content once we start working with a company. Also, we've created our own product, Contesaur, because we were fed up with working with Excel sheets. So we are now a startup, gladly founded, gladly supported by Czech Invest agency right now. So we are creating our own app as well. So we are more diving into the startup world and the software as such. As you've seen in the talks before, it's amazing to work in a team of people, in a team of designers, in a team of very skillful people that are built together to work very closely with the developers since the start of the product. And it's a really beautiful world. I mean, usually in the UX team, you should have 3 really happy people. There is a UX writer, there is a designer, and there is a researcher. They are working very closely, and the UX writer is responsible for the words, the designer is responsible for the design as such, and the researcher is responsible for all the testing, all the insights based on the interviews with the users. This is the process that should be followed, let's say, in the real ideal world. I am the first UX writer that is actually certified in the Czech Republic. And this was the process that I was learning while doing so, that this is like how it's supposed to go. So first you have a UX research. You need to understand the user terms, the emotions, everything that is connected to the problem you are actually trying to solve. Then you have the process of ideation. That means you need to map the customer journey, as we've seen in the talk of Erin, setting voice, tone, terminology. You are setting the product persona, the voice, the tone, all of those things. Then there is low fidelity wireframes and high fidelity wireframes. That's mostly the designer's work, but the UX writer doesn't just sit in the corner with hands crossed. They are naming the features, labels, sections, headings. They are creating the information architecture. That means the user, you cannot just give all the information to the user at once. You need to do the hierarchy, you need to make it slower, make it more acceptable for them to learn the information you are providing. And high fidelity wireframes, once you are finalizing the design, you are also finalizing the text. So you are writing final copy, you are creating support, you are trying to prevent the errors of the user while he or she or them go through the app. And you also work with Figma and Sketch very closely. Then you have usability testing. Now the hero is always also the UX researcher as in the beginning. But the UX writer is very important while you are testing your final designs, because the user talks somehow, they use some terms, they are stuck somewhere, and you need to follow it very closely. So then you can tweak the text, you can really listen, change the flows, support them with tooltips and other tools once they are stuck somewhere. And after all this, there comes the development. Yay, finally you can make the product. So the UX writer at this point writes error messages, string metrics, there is localization happening, variations of the product. And the product doesn't end here. You are releasing it to the market, and now you start receiving feedback. You are starting to receive reviews, and you need to react on them. So you are still incorporating all this feedback that is collecting in your message. And also, you finally have some real data of people actually using your product. So you need to analyze all those data. You need to add new features, so the work doesn't really stop. You are still working in the loop. This is the ideal process that should be in place if we would be in an ideal world. Now let's talk about what we experience as a marketing agency in the day-to-day work for our clients. You usually don't have a team. There is one person in the company. usually a bit of frustrated designer. And this person does the design, does the text, and they are really happy if they can actually make some testing with the users. It usually doesn't happen at all. They just like they just talk with the stakeholders. They are playing this guessing game of what's best, what would the users want, and then the stakeholder comes and says, I want it blue. So that's basically the only input the designer has. And yeah, so then the process itself is a bit messy. In my work as an agency, as an external agency for the companies, I usually experienced two types of processes taking place. The first one is design-centric. The second one is development-centric. So in the design-centric, the designer is the god of the product. They have a very clear view, or the stakeholders are like very heavy on design. So they have like very clear view on how the product should function, how it should look like, how it should feel. So the design is the king, and everything else, like visual design, is the king, and everything else just kind of follows. The second process is more common in my experience, the development-centric one. It's usually that there is a company full of developers. They are making a product, so they make the product. Like, what's the fuss? So you don't have any Figma. You don't have any sketch. The product just is getting developed as it goes. You don't even have like any Excel sheet with all the text. It's usually just like some JSON or some other file that if you need to text anything or change any text in the product, you need to go actually to the code and write it. And then everything kind of happens at once. So something changes, it goes push to development, it is released, the users use it, they complain to the customer support, and round and round the wheel goes. And at this point, we usually appear. And the request from the companies to us is they ask usually for a new website. Or they ask for a blog post, a newsletter, a sales material, some brochure, or some leaflet. And we come in as copywriters. And now we are really wondering of what's happening above it, above the website. Like, I mean, it's very cool to have a new, nice website. Everybody wants a nice new website. But if you have the greatest website in the world, and people come to your website, and you have very high conversion rate, and you are collecting loads of leads, and then people just log into your app, and they stop using it in first 10 minutes. What good does it do? So then we look at analytics at this point, and we start asking like really bad questions, like troublemaking questions, like what's your funnel? Where are people leaving? What is your conversion rate? How many people actually get to paying for the license? Things like that. And then we usually, not always, find out that there is some problem with onboarding, that people get lost in the app, that people don't have any support materials, and the customer support center is overloaded, and everybody's frustrated because they are answering the same questions again and again. And we say, okay, like we can make you a great new website, but what about we just like fix your funnel a bit? What about we just go through your product and start putting all those little tooltips that could help the user? And you see, like user just fall out at this point. Why do they fall out at this point? Where is your trouble? And we are trying to support them like this. And then after all those conversations and all those hard work, just trying to convince someone, if they budge, then we get to be UX writers. And then we go to the app, and then we start talking with the designers. And then we start talking about, okay, so this is the pain point in the app. Can we fix it with design? Can we fix it with words? How can we fix the whole funnel? So that was my talk. I hope I didn't rant a bit. I understand definitely that MVPs are very important. You don't need to have all the words right, like since the release. It's really tight, especially when you are a startup. Money is really tight. So you need to make really smart decisions and be really, really scarce with your money, really smart with your money. But once you are a bit of bigger company or the product takes off and you are actually considering investing in a new website or investing in some of the other marketing materials, it's great to stop for a bit and take a look back at your product and see if there is any work that needs to be prioritized before that. Thank you very much. I would be glad if you would connect me on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me an email. And it's very great to be part of this content meetup. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Are there any questions?
Oh,
Please.
Yeah, I have a question, maybe a little bit stupid one, but you have your. I understand you provide the service, but but you have some kind of digital product. What does your product do?
Yeah, Contesaur, the digital product, is a web application that helps you plan your marketing strategically and cooperate with your marketing team. So that's basically, if you are a company and you have some business, business strategy. You have some products, you have some customers, there is some funnel for your sales, and you need to plan everything. Like you are having newsletters, blog posts, websites, social media, whatever you make, and you kind of need to do this metrics where all your products and all your customers are covered. And I had to use it Excel sheets. So that's why we created Contesaur that does this for you. And thanks to Check Invest, we are adding very cool AI feature this year to help you plan your content marketing even better. Did I answer?
Yeah, I have one more question, but I'll wait for others.
You can even catch up with me after the event. I'm glad to answer any questions you might have.
Why do you think it's more common for companies to be engineering-led than design-led?
I think it's given that we usually work with with developer companies. So that's basically most of our experience is that it's developer-based because we are working with tech companies. So they usually, like 50% of them have their own designer, but mostly it's just like a group of developers that do their products.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll thank you then. I think to all the speakers, Erin, Ria, and Vladka, I think that we saw the different angles you can look at content design, UX writing, even copywriting, whatever you decide to call it. But at the end of the day, when I was inviting people on LinkedIn, I said, like, let's imagine ourselves as the friends of words that do the work. So I hope that this is somehow the punchline and the thing you're getting home with. But if you don't rush home, you can stay here at least for some time to talk to the speakers. They are staying for a minute. There's drinks in the fridge. There's food on that table. And if you want, we have a very special feature to our offices. We have a rooftop, and there's a really beautiful view of Prague. So if you haven't been there with Jan before we started, I can take you upstairs. Thanks a lot.